Good afternoon. My name is Akin Oshuntoki. I am the Vice Chairman of the Oil and Gas Group at the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce. It is my great pleasure to welcome us to this event. The theme of this webinar is Global Developments, Implications for Investment and Opportunities in Nigeria. We have on our panel today world-class professionals who are here to discuss the theme of this webinar. Later on in this event, you will get to meet them. Before I go too far, I'll ask that we observe the national anthem of Nigeria and thereafter the national anthem of Britain. Thank you. Let me share the webinar guidelines with us. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. To comment and have discussions, please use the chat icon. Please submit your questions via the Q&A icon. Let me say that only questions sent on the Q&A icon will be attended to. It is now time to invite Mr. Kayode Falowo, President and Chairman of Council, NBCC, Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Falowo, thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Council of the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, I wish to formally welcome you all to this webinar organized by the Oil and Gas Group of the Chamber. Today, we will attempt to make sense of the shifts in the world economic order following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The webinar will review the effects of this global development on the crucial sectors of our economy and its threats to our way of life. To this end, we have some of the most experienced people in the oil and gas sector in Africa to throw light on the subject and provide solutions to ameliorate the economic fallout of the pandemic on the industry. The speakers will also help to identify new opportunities for investments in Nigerian oil and gas sector. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the pleasure of introducing our panel of speakers and our moderator for today's event. They are Engineer Simbi Wabote, Executive Secretary, Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board. Due to Engineer Wabote's urgent state matters, he is unavoidably absent, but he is being represented by a director in NCDMB, Mr. Akintunde Adelano. You're welcome, Mr. Adelano. Our second speaker is a well-known executive in the oil industry. He is Austin Avuru, Chief Executive Officer of Seplat Petroleum Development Company. As you all know, Seplat is a major actor in the sector, and that's the company whose shares are listed on both the Nigerian Stock Exchange and the London Stock Exchange. The third speaker is a man that is quite dear to us at NBCC. He is a very supportive member of the council and the chairman of our oil and gas sector, which is the sector that has put this event together. Please join me in giving a special welcome to Osage Okumbo, Country Chair, Shell Companies in Nigeria, and Managing Director of the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria. Thank you, Osage, for your efforts and your cooperation, and you're welcome to this event. Today's event shall be moderated by one of the top female executives in the oil and gas industry. She is Mrs. Fatai Williams, General Manager, External Relations and Sustainable Development, Nigeria LNG Limited. I'm quite certain that this eminent assembly of leaders in the oil and gas sector will do justice to the subject, and we shall all be better prepared to ride the turbulence associated with the disruptions in the industry. I especially recognize the patrons, past presidents and council members of NBCC who have joined us at this event. I also thank members of our oil and gas group, the chairman and members of the programs committee, and our secretariat for this excellent event. The NBCC is a bilateral organization whose main objective is to foster trade and investment relations between Nigeria and the UK. We are 33 years old, and we currently have 300 top corporate organizations in Nigeria and the UK as members. I am pleased to invite you to view a list of our membership on our website, but I also wish to draw attention to the list of our premium members who have been particularly great and useful to the Chamber through their guidance and support over the years. The premium members are Standard Chartered Bank, UBA PLC, PwC, Access Bank PLC, British Airways, Custodian and Allied Insurance, Seplat Petroleum Development Company, thank you, Ms. Avuru, Fidelity Bank, UTL Trustees, and Wema Bank PLC. The NBCC is an affiliate of the British Chamber of Commerce, which gives our members access to a network of 53 chambers across the UK and 49 other affiliates worldwide. Let me use the opportunity of this event to invite forward-looking companies who are yet to join the NBCC to do so. You can commence our application screening process by visiting our website and interacting with the membership committee. I shall be delighted to have the honor of inducting successful applicants as members. Thereafter, they will have access to the tremendous benefits attributable to the membership of the foremost bilateral chamber in Nigeria. Before making comments on today's topic, I am pleased to draw the attention of this august gathering to our MBCC Plaza project. This is a 4-story structure currently being developed at Lekki Phase 1 by the Chamber to provide accommodation for our secretariat. It will also house an incubation center for British businesses in Nigeria during their formative stages and provide a center for seminars and trainings to our members and indeed the general public. I wish to take this opportunity also to acknowledge all stakeholders who have made special contributions towards the development of the plaza. Some of these are Dangote Industries Limited, Greenwich Trust Limited, and Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria. Again, thank you very much, Osagi Okubo. Whilst noting that significant progress has been made with the support from all our donors, we will require additional funding to ensure the timely completion of the plaza. We look forward to contacting some of you in this regard and shall be pleased to receive your support in cash and kind. Regarding today's topic, we note as a chamber that the overwhelming sentiment around the oil and gas sector in Nigeria following the latest disruption of the industry is at best cautious optimism. All variables of demand, supply, and pricing have not been cheering, and projections by experts do not suggest a return to normalcy soon. Rather, popular opinion is that a new normal has emerged in the industry, setting new baselines for prices and the demand-supply situation. Nigeria, being an import-dependent oil and gas economy, has been significantly impacted by these developments. Recent FGN statements confirm that Nigeria's 2020 revenue earnings could be impaired by as much as 40% of initial projections. Notwithstanding the recent events, we believe that opportunities still exist for knowledgeable and efficient players in the Nigerian oil sector to thrive. Nigeria still requires a high share of globally available investment funds to unlock its massive proven reserves, grow the petroleum industry's contributions to domestic GDP, and translate this to inclusive socio-economic growth for the nation. Recent data from the National Bureau of Statistics indicate that oil provides over 75% of government revenue and over 90% of its foreign exchange earnings. However, contribution to the GDP has hovered around 10% in recent times. Thus, while the oil and gas sector is a critical enabler of our budget, the GDP data suggests that there's wide room for more participation of the industry in sustainable economic development. An area of opportunity is in the rising global demand for cleaner sources of energy, such as liquefied natural gas. The FGN recently declared 2020 as the year of gas in Nigeria, while the UK government plans to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel powered cars from 2035. Obviously, these initiatives will boost activities in the gas industry. Digitalization of the oil and gas industry is another imperative, given the new normal occasioned by the pandemic. Africa's oil and gas sector has 30% of its production from legacy fields. This presents immense opportunity for technology firms and other oil service companies in the process of digitalizing the sector. By 2050, our nation will become the world's third largest country by population, becoming one of the 6 nations projected to have a population of over 300 million. This will lead, obviously, to increased consumption of energy to run our transportation systems, our homes, and businesses. Opportunities, therefore, exist for investment in smart energy to meet the needs that will arise in the future. Clearly, there are so many other opportunities that could come, but I think that we have a panel made up of extremely knowledgeable, experienced market participants. And I think that I would allow them to provide us with the in-depth knowledge that they have of these opportunities so that we can all learn and be better for it. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for your attention and wish you a productive session. Before I leave, I have the pleasure to invite the representative of the Executive Secretary of the NCDMB, Mr. Akintunde Adealana, to give the address of Mr. Simbi Wabote. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Kayode Falowo, President and Chairman, Council, NBCC. I'm here representing Executive Secretary, NCDMB, Engineer Simbi Kesi Wabote, who couldn't make it today, but he has actually given me the directive to represent him, and I will be speaking his mind at this platform today. Let me again congratulate the NBCC for putting this together at this time. This is really an important time to begin to discuss sustainability and survival beyond 2020. I also want to very quickly recognize my co-panelists on this event this afternoon. Mr. Austin Aburu, CEO Seplat, and my own Oga, Okumbo Osage, the country chair for share companies in Nigeria. I also, at the same time, want to appreciate the audience and all executives and past presidents of NBCC. My task this afternoon is to speak around the topic, understanding current global development and implications, investment and local opportunities in Nigeria. I have with me a number of slides which will center around the current global developments, implications for investment, local opportunities, and of course I have more like a closing thoughts, a conclusion of the discussions. Today, globally, we're all aware of the current events shaping our world, starting with COVID-19, which is a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. I think we read about things like this. I wasn't around then, back in early 20th century, around 1918. And then we had cases here and there over time before now. But this is global and has had a serious impact on the world. Other events affecting the world are the current anti-government protests in Hong Kong as a result of some laws that have been promulgated in that environment. And then the activities towards the US election in November, and of course, the activities around protests in the United States, around the killing of George Floyd, which has given rise to the protests on the Black Lives Matter issue. Then, of course, the US-China trade war currently ongoing. All this goes together, and then coming back home, we have the tremendous effect one of the COVID-19, which has in a way affected our revenue base. We heard from the chairman while he was giving his opening speech that the country generates revenue to the size of about 75% from oil and gas. Oil and gas also attracts over about 95% of FX, and then contribute 10% to GDP. And anything that affects the revenue base of the country definitely will affect the economy in the short and, of course, the long run. So oil and gas prices fell drastically, and this has greatly affected activities globally. We also had a sharp drop in production due to reduced demand for oil and gas as a result of the lockdown globally, as well as the reduction in production as allocated by OPEC. The negative effect of this, of course, is quite enormous. I have just a few of them. There are several effects that one cannot particularly clearly state everything at a go. First, there's been a serious effect on the health sector, not only in Nigeria, but globally. There's scarce medical supplies. As a matter of fact, manufacturing facilities have to begin to convert their manufacturing line to support the health sector in the manufacture of some very critical medical supplies. Health workers were overwhelmed. Well over 1 million health workers have been affected by the pandemic, and many health workers have lost their lives in this process. Little attention has been given to other ailments outside COVID-19, and this in a way has also been affecting the economy at large and the people. For example, in Nigeria, Lassa fever is one other ailment that should be given attention, as much as COVID-19. At the same time, global coalition is being affected. Most people, most countries, most nations are beginning to think more about themselves. They're beginning to look inwards. They're beginning to concentrate on what I would tag as survival at this time. Like someone said, in year 2020, we should be more concerned about survival rather than profitability. If you were able to survive in 2020, then of course, beyond 2020, we can then begin to recalibrate and re-energize ourselves to move on. But for 2020, the focus should be on self-preservation. Trade alliances between nations have been set aside. People are more concerned about the local economy, about the survival of the citizens. Again, lack of global leadership, economic losses. The pandemic has resulted in lockdown in almost every part of the world, meaning that businesses have to shut down. Employment rates are rising, unemployment rates are rising, and as such, that has negative effect and great cost. There's a lot of taxes, duties, and levies to government. Salaries have been delayed or reduced, or in some cases halved. And the low oil price, which has resulted in scaling down projects, job losses, and losses of revenue. Okay, next slide, please. But despite all these negative impacts, there's still opportunities. As a result of this, there's that positive impact of the effect of COVID-19 and the current dispensation globally. Today, we're sitting here, we're having this discussion, which normally could have happened through other modes, but we're doing this via the internet. So a lot of us are spending so much money on internet and data. And of course, this is an opportunity for the internet service providers. E-commerce is thriving, online shopping, video conferencing, virtual meeting, and all other solutions tailored towards virtual relationship is actually growing. Manufacturing sectors, like I said earlier, some automobile industries are converting their production line to support the medical industry through the production of ventilators, hand sanitizers, masks, other sorts of PPEs that will be required to support the medical industry for the time being. Of course, we need to continue to maintain productivity globally and sustain our business for the time being, believing that at a point in time, COVID-19 will be a thing of the past. Medical facilities, local supply chains, automated local supply chains is one key area that we also need to look at. And then it's also an opportunity to begin to take a second look at our cost base and begin to become more innovative in the things we do, so we can spend less in terms of cost. Then I would very briefly come back home, talk specifically about the opportunities in Nigeria. Next slide, please. I work for NCDMB, and NCDMB is one of the government agencies established in 2010 on the back of the NOGIC, that's Nigerian Oil and Gas Industry Development Content Act 2010. We've been around for over 10 years, and our main focus and mandate is to enable the industry, to facilitate business in the industry, to continuously add value in the industry. So for us in NCDMB, we have actually contributed within this period to ensure that business is sustained, to ensure that the revenue base of the nation is not in any way adversely affected. We have increased the Nigerian Content Intervention Fund, which is the NCI, which is a part of the Nigerian Content Development Fund, from $200 million to $350 million. Currently, we're working on the No Gaps initiative, where we plan to set up parks, oil and gas parks, in the oil and gas zones, oil and gas communities in the country. We have about 6 of them in line, and as of today, 2 of them, one in Bayelsa, Emeya 1, and the other one in Odupani in Cross River State, are close to 40% completed. This is an opportunity. This park will be an opportunity for local manufacturers to establish and develop their manufacturing initiatives. We are going to be able to provide power, provide all the necessary amenities that will be required to smoothly operate as a manufacturing entity in that particular park. We have commercial venture relationships and partnership with so many other organizations. Currently, we have with Watersmith towards developing a 5,000 barrels per day modular refinery. And then also with Azikel Refinery in Bayelsa State. Watersmith is in Imo State. And Watersmith will come on stream come 2021. And I can say categorically here that the pandemic has in no way slow us down. We're moving on. We've set aside a $50 million R&D fund to support R&D initiatives. You all agree with me that R&D is key in any environment for growth and development of the economy. We're also organizing a hackathon, which is more like an innovation incubation initiative where young Nigerians with technology ideas can come around and showcase it. And we will support those technology to a level that will be globally acceptable. Other government agencies like the Central Bank of Nigeria have introduced many other initiatives to help support cushion the effect of COVID-19 and the downturn in the economy. Central Bank, for instance, introduced a 50 billion Naira COVID-19 intervention fund for SME and has also reduced lending rates. Local production and processing of agricultural products is also one other area that CBN is also supporting through the Agricultural Credit Guarantee Scheme Fund. The Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, through the MANLOC, that's the local content arm of MAN, are also looking inward to identify local raw materials that could easily substitute for foreign inputs. Locally manufacture of pharmaceutical products is also one other area that is an opportunity that we are looking at in collaboration with the professionals in that particular field, in the health sectors precisely. Again, like I said earlier, IT is one other area that is an opportunity. It's still available. It's a global opportunity, available in Nigeria and available all over the world. Also, we have the 2.3 million Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan to be implemented. Of course, we have so many. We are contributing to this. We are looking at so many of those initiatives and the pillars and identifying where we as Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board can connect and can actually support. For us in NCDMB, immediately we went into this COVID-19 mode. We identified 3 key areas. Next slide, please. We identified 3 key areas. One of them is a duty of care, followed by business continuity, and then, of course, the palliatives to support, to cushion the effect of the COVID-19. The duty of care is to continuously look at the health and the welfare of our staff and our immediate community. And we have strived to maintain a zero level with respect to COVID infection. Business continuity is that at the same time, while we're looking at the effect of COVID, we're still going to continue to work. And we have immediately sprung into action. And we have been working, we have been collaborating with the industry, we have been facilitating, we of course facilitated the sign-off of the contract for the Train 7 project with the Nigerian LNG. And you all agree with me, this happened within the period, during the lockdown. That's part of the idea to ensure that business continue. COVID palliatives, yes, we supported states, we supported the federal government in offering some sort of support. And this is still a continuous process. I must say here that we are social beings. There may be physical distancing, but we will always find a way to connect. Form mode and there will be platform to continue to evolve. There will be new civilization. COVID-19 is more or less here for now, and nobody knows. There's a lot of uncertainty around this. Nobody knows when this is going to come to an end. So we need to find a way to survive, to keep living. So there will be new civilization. There will be new ways of doing things. There will be new realities. We need to very quickly get acclimatized to this new concept. We need to accept changes and then adapt as quickly as possible. Banks, imagine banks without branches, online, strictly online. Imagine worship centers without physical worship centers, online worship centers, working medical diagnosis chambers, and so on and so forth. This is, for us in NCDMB, we strongly believe that wings are not only for birds, they are also for minds. So human potential stops at some point, somewhere beyond infinity. This is a saying that we hold strongly, and we strongly believe that we will survive. Thank you so much for giving me this platform to speak. I want to thank again the Chairman and President of NBCC and all the executives for this opportunity. I think I have to invite my boss, Austin Aguru, MD Steplat, to take over. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Over to you, Austin.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I thought the moderator was coming. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'll spend the next 15 minutes addressing the theme of this webinar from point of view of where I think should be the future place of oil and gas in our developing economy as a nation. At the beginning, you saw the introduction by the chairman of NBCC, where he attributed oil and gas revenues to account for about 75% of our usual budget revenues, and about 90% of our foreign exchange earnings. Those figures have dramatically changed under the current circumstances. Falling oil prices, increasing costs of production have meant that revenues, I usually call them rental revenues derivable from oil and gas, as a percentage of our budget revenues, have reduced drastically. In 2019, oil and gas revenues accounted for about 47% of the original budgeted revenues. In 2020, the projection, considering the current circumstances, is that oil and gas revenues will probably fall below 30% of the original 11 trillion Naira budget for 2020. And going forward, we think we're going to be seeing lower prices for much longer. And the forward curve, even up to 2024, is still hanging around, 40, 45, and generally less than $50 per barrel, even into 2024. So the implication of this is that the days of oil and gas revenues, oil and gas rental revenues, being almost the sole source of funding for our budgets, those days are gone. And so there's a new paradigm shift that we have to address. And that is to say that the Nigerian economic landscape has changed. It has changed from oil and gas being the main source of our budget to a situation where oil and gas will now have to come to terms with oil and gas revenues accounting for less than 45% of our budget revenues. And so what do we need to do? It means that in designing whatever parameters for our economic growth as a country, we need to make this shift, not just mentally, but practically. It means that a few things have to be addressed as a nation, as an economy. We have to take a close look at regional integration. So in our economic planning, I think we now need to start taking the West African sub-region as one economic unit, both in terms of our target production, in terms of the target market, and in terms of what we do with our oil and gas resources. We have to take the entire West African sub-region as one economic unit. So every time in this short period, I'll address you, every time we talk about domestic, I'm not just referring to Nigeria, I'm actually referring to the entire West African sub-region. And so the key things we need to address our minds to will be, what do we do to turn oil and gas from being a rent-supporting industry to becoming an enabler for economic growth? What do we do to make oil and gas or hydrocarbon an enabler for economic growth in West Africa? That's really where we now have to turn our minds to. Because oil and gas we now need to contribute to an enlarged economy, to much higher economic activity, which will in turn widen our tax base. So that to support our budget, we'll be looking for much bigger economic activity, and therefore a much larger tax base that will generate the bulk of the revenue we're looking for to support our budget. If, as we have said earlier, oil and gas will now be accounting for less than 45% of that budget. So the base of economic activities must be critically enlarged. And that's where we need to think of, where does oil and gas come into enlarging our economic, the base of our economic activity? The number one candidate for this assignment is gas. We've talked about this. The Minister of State Minister of State for Petroleum Resources has declared 2020 as the year for gas, the gas year for Nigeria. And this has to be taken seriously. In the 30 years or so to about 2015, 30 years to 2010, I would say, domestic gas consumption in Nigeria stagnated at less than 300 million scf of gas a day. Between 2010 and 2015, when the new power sector reform came in, and that power sector reform depended largely on gas for the increased power generation that the country contemplated. In this period of 5 years, domestic consumption went from 300 million scf to about 1 BCF per day. Unfortunately, there's been a stagnation in the power sector expansion since 2015 for several reasons. But the key reason being that the power sector has been unable to fund itself from end to end. So we don't have a market-driven tariff that generates all the revenues that are required to oil the entire sector. That is, generates enough revenue to pay the power generating companies, who will in turn have to pay for the gas that that feeds into their power plants. And because of that, over the past 5 years, there's been a stagnation in the expansion of the power sector, and therefore also a stagnation in domestic gas consumption. But we will eventually overcome that problem, because this economy, to get to where we need it to be in terms of an expanded economy and an expanded tax base, has to be consuming and therefore generating not less than, today we're at 4 gigawatts of electricity. This is where we've been in the past 10 years, really. And that power generation and consumption base has to grow to between 10 and 15 gigawatts of electricity. And to grow to that kind of size, you will need to consume about 3 BCF of gas a day. So that's where gas comes in. So gas has to come in to stimulate power generation, which in turn will stimulate the rest of the economy, from micro businesses up to the big businesses. They all need power, a large base of power generation and consumption to survive. So gas comes in to stimulate power generation, power consumption, which will in turn stimulate the bigger part of the larger size of the economy. Gas also has to come in to fuel heavy industries, iron and steel, when we finally get that up and running again, cement, which has witnessed one of the largest expansions in the manufacturing sector in Nigeria, from being a huge cement importer, we are now net cement exporters. Oil and gas into fertilizers, and therefore fertilizers to address our agriculture. So you can see that gas to fertilizer, and then fertilizer to agriculture. So just between power generation and consumption, fertilizer for agriculture, and heavy industries like cement, iron and steel, and a few other ceramics and the rest of them, you see that gas can triple the size of our productive manufacturing sector, create a much, much larger manufacturing base, a much, much larger economy that will then create a tax base that will make up for what we're losing in oil and gas revenues as rents. Even our crude oil production now has to focus on domestic refining, so that we're not just exporting crude oil and importing petroleum products. We now have to process crude oil domestically and feed our domestic consumption of petroleum products. There is no reason why any country in West Africa over the next 3 years should be importing petroleum products from Europe or the US. Dangote refinery alone, when it's fully functional, can service the entire West African sub-region and still have some spare to export outside of Africa. And there is a cluster of small refineries, 5,000 to 10,000 barrels per day, that are targeted at supplying the immediate vicinity for the petroleum products that they need. So again, we're moving away from just exporting raw crude oil and importing products into a point where we actually become a major hub in West Africa and even the Southern African part of the world in terms of supplying petroleum products out of the crude oil that we refine domestically. So when we get to that point, it means therefore that one, we'll capture the entire West African sub-region as a market for the power we generate, as a market for the gas that we can supply to that whole sub-region. We already have a gas pipeline that goes from here in Nigeria to Ghana. That gas pipeline can take 120, 150 million scf of gas a day. That can be expanded and doubled to 300 million scf of gas a day. And that pipeline can be extended all the way to Senegal. And when that happens with 300 million scf of gas a day into that pipeline, we deliver 1.2 gigawatts of electricity. That's probably about all of the electricity that the rest of West Africa outside Nigeria needs in the next 5 years to stimulate their economies. And when you stimulate those economies, other heavy industries will spring up, demanding further gas from us. So we're in a situation where over the next 5 years, once we achieve this regional integration, we can be delivering up to 400 million scf of gas into the West African sub-region. And you imagine the multiplier effects. Remember that out of the 1.1 billion Africa, 600 million, more than half, have no access to electricity. So you can imagine what I'm describing, just 400 million scf of gas into West Africa, the multiplier effects, not just to the economy, but even to the livelihood and quality of life of those who live in West Africa. So the real point I'm making is that the incidents of the last 5 months, COVID-19, the drop in oil prices, all of those have converged to bring into sharp focus what has already been there, what has always been there as a critical problem we need to solve. We need to now look domestic. We need to expand domestic consumption. Economic growth is not measured by how much energy you produce. It is measured by how much energy you consume. We now need to turn the West African sub-region into a major consumer of energy. And the starting point for that is not just refining our petroleum product, that's our crude oil, but in fact expanding our gas consumption and therefore our gas production out of Nigeria to feed the entire West Africa. So when this happens, we again address a major global issue and that is energy transition. Everybody is talking about ESG, everybody is talking about energy transition. Energy transition is really moving the energy basket. There's always a basket of energy sources that will deliver the energy the whole world needs. That basket, over the past century, and in particular over the last 50 years, has been made up principally of coal, crude oil, and natural gas. That basket mix is shifting now into a dominance, a reduction in coal production and consumption, into an increase in gas production to make up for the reduction in coal, and then eventually a reduction even in crude oil consumption. So gas is a major solution to this energy transition. Unfortunately, we have it now in abundance, not just in Nigeria, but almost across Africa. And so the focus will be to see how that gas production and consumption fits into not just solving our economic problems in the sub-region and across Africa, but actually into its contribution in providing solutions to the energy transition. So finally, what are therefore the investment opportunities that you will see? What are the investment opportunities that have been brought into focus by this crisis we have had in the past 3-4 months? The crisis has brought into sharp focus the need for investments in infrastructure, the need for investments in midstream oil and gas processing, the need for investments in transportation infrastructure for our energy needs, which means the infrastructure to deliver electricity to the entire continent, the infrastructure to deliver gas to all the countries that need it, the infrastructure to displace HPFO and LPFO and coal with gas that will deliver cleaner energy and energy that this sub-region needs to stimulate the growth of the economy. The infrastructure that is required to build a larger economic base away from oil and gas, just oil and gas exports being a primary source of revenue, into oil and gas simply stimulating through existing infrastructure and the fact that we have it in abundance, stimulating the larger economy, creating a large tax base such that even when oil and gas accounts for only 30% of our budget, the rest of the 70% required to fund the budget will come from the larger tax base that would have been created by these investments in infrastructure, investments in processing, investments in the midstream, investments in transportation, and investments overall that will then yield an economy that makes the inhabitants of this sub-region, lifts their quality of life, lifts their GDP per capita, and then starts moving us as a continent and as a sub-region closer and closer to the quality of life that we deserve as human beings. And so my parting words would then be to say, the days of export of primary commodities, mining, products of mining, agriculture, oil and gas, exporting them as primary commodities to establish or grow the economies of other continents and create energy security in other continents, those days are going behind us. And investments we need now are the investments that are required to create a domestic economy that is propelled by domestic energy security. And there's just as much profit, as much money to be made, as much economic activity in these new areas that I'm describing as they were, perhaps even a lot more than we had in the case of just taking these primary commodities and shipping them abroad. This is the period for oil and gas now becoming a stimulant for an enlarged domestic economy that is built on domestic energy security. That's where we're going, and that's really my contribution into this debate today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin Avuru, for that inspiring presentation. We shouldn't look at just Nigeria, but we must begin to look at West Africa. If we truly say we are the giant of Africa, then at least this charity should start at home. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite our third and final panelist, Mr. Osagi Okumbo, to give us another perspective wearing the lens of an international oil company. Mr. Osagi, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can someone unmute my, start my video? Because I can't do that. Okay, thank you very much. And a pleasure to be here. Let me start by thanking our President and Chairman of Council of the MBCC, Kayode Falowo, as well as my panelists for an excellent session so far. To thank Tunde Adelona on behalf of Simbi Wabote for a great presentation, but also to thank my friend for a long time, Austin Avuru, not just for his presentation today, but for what he has been and represented for this industry. I believe this is probably his last couple of days before he hands over the baton of leadership in Seplat to a new CEO. But I would say that means Austin is being released more to us in the Nigerian society. For, as you can still see from his presentation, his passion is undiminished. And certainly it will be a great welcome addition to the body of contributors to our economic debate, particularly in the oil and gas industry. So it's been a pleasure to have been with Austin through these years in advocacy for this industry, but also, I'm sure, for many years to come. Thank you very much, Austin. In my own session, I would do a bit more to just talk a bit more about the history of how we got to where we are today. I always have to start with a cautionary note to say whatever I say here should be no basis for investment decisions in the industry. So that's what you see in the fine print. But just to ask ourselves, how did we get to where we are? I'll spend a bit more time to just dig a bit deeper in the wider global stage to just try and understand better how we got here. I have been a few decades, over 3 decades in this industry. We have seen twists and turns, ups and downs. We will normally ride it as bombs. But nothing, I would say, prepared the industry and indeed the global economy for the perfect storm that we saw at the end of at the end of March, early April, when a combination of excess supply and a severely constrained demand resulted in what had been the biggest crash we ever saw in the history of the industry. The US has traditionally been a big importer of crude. But we saw for the first time in November of 2019, the US becoming a net exporter. I mean, in terms of what they exported, it was just about 89,000 barrels of oil a day, but it was quite significant because a decade earlier, they were probably importing net 10 million barrels of oil. At the same time as we saw the US-China trade war that essentially created a big distortion, leading to very severe demand contradictions. And then we had the COVID-19, which essentially completely destroyed global demand. I mean, by most estimates, the world was expected in 2020 to consume about 100 million barrels of oil a day. And by many accounts, the COVID and all these other attendant issues, particularly the US-China trade war, essentially ensured that about half of that demand was essentially killed off. So by most accounts, 50 million barrels of oil was killed off the market. And that's not too far to understand. About 60% of consumption typically comes from all manners of transportation sources, air, marine, roads, and we are all witnesses to the fact that that whole sector has almost been destroyed at the height of this pandemic. And to top everything, this was a time when the Saudis and the Russians then decided to engage in an oil price war. So it was a complete perfect storm that essentially took out 30% of the oil demand from the market. That led us to the infamous day for us in the industry, 20th April, when we saw for the first time the WTI essentially trade at negative territory. That was, this is still quite unbelievable to a number of players in the industry, where the futures trade for May essentially traded the negative territory of close to minus $40. It's still quite difficult for people to understand. At that same time, for us, Brent essentially traded at around $13, $14 a barrel. So this really, the negative territory was essentially for the WTI. But 20th April will remain in our memories for a very long time. See what happens to Brent and our own Nigerian streams. Traditionally, we say our Nigerian stream, our Nigerian stream trends with the Brent. So that means it's more or less traded at roughly the same price as the Brent. You can see from this chart that up till the beginning of March, we're trading our Nigerian streams at roughly 1 to 2 barrels premium on the Brent. Let me see what happened after March as this whole collapse happened. The essence of this chart is just tell you how difficult it became for us to trade our Nigerian crude. If you look around that period of beginning of May, you will see that our crude at some point was trading in the region of $6 less than the Brent. And if you look at the Brent price at that time, you see we're around the $15 mark. So what that's essentially saying is that around that period, our crude volumes were actually, just because of the lack of demand, many of us heard about it at the time, was trading in single digits. So certainly less than the average cost of production. So those were really, really dark days for our industry. We are beginning to see some recovery of prices. I think we are now trading about at par again as the Brent, which is the biggest sign yet. And today at about $42, $43 a barrel, we can see some semblance of reduction. But those two very dark months of late March to beginning of May, I think would take us some time to recover from in the industry. The outlook looks pretty positive, at least bated breath, as I would say. You can see around the Q4 2020, we are still, essentially for the rest of the year, we are still looking to crude trading in the low to mid 40s, and then hoping to see recovery starting from Q1 2021. But I have to say this is based on projections by Goldman Sachs and a number of the entities that are well poised to do this. But we are all operating, frankly, from unknown territory. And we are not, there's really no template to say anything. Things cannot go south again. A lot depends, of course, on how far we sustain the recovery, how far the economic recoveries across the world essentially hold. And most will say until a medical solution in terms of a vaccine is found, that essentially likely leads to a recovery of the transportation, whether air, marine, or land transportation. Until that comes, we are really not sure what can happen. You can really already see that with the reopening up happening in most of the Europe and the US, you can see lockdowns being introduced as we begin to see surges of the COVID-19. So this is the best projection we can see to date, that full recovery will come quite some time further down, maybe way up to Q4 2021, if all things being equal. The OPEC plus cuts is helping, but the compliance, as you know, will be will be vital, and that hurts for us as a country. That has meant our production dropping from the 1.8, 1.9 level to million level to the 1.4 million levels. But that's probably OPEC's own way of interjecting to see that some measure of recovery happens. The big issue, certainly for investments, we have to all accept that much of the investment dollars that are needed in our industry, at least at this time, still will have to come from international capital. It's a fact that we all have to live with. And if you see the charts here, particularly the chart to the right, you can see a projection by Wood Mackenzie of what capital expenditure will look like coming into Africa. West Africa is the gray element there. The outlook is that into the near future, capital will be scarce. So that's very instructive for us as a country, because even as the world recovers and we begin to recover in terms of projects build up, we have to do everything within our powers to make sure that we attract a very sizable part of the capex that will come to Africa. Of the 50 billion odds that is projected to come to Africa, what do we do to make sure Nigeria and West Africa gets a decent share? That would be a very important consideration for us, quite apart from the more local elements that both the Adelano and Austin have very eloquently painted. So what does it mean for us? I mean, the industry one, we would do our bit to make sure that we size our portfolios and size our investments in a way that delivers for us the best value in the short, medium, and long term. But let me pay a bit more attention to our country and what we should be doing. I think a lot of very, very good thoughts laid out earlier by Mr. Adelano and Mr. Avuru. But there are elements, a few elements I will just add. Like it or not, our foreign exchange revenues in the immediate short term will still have to come from oil and gas. So our cost of production today, which averages the mid-20s to $30 on account of the data that's been put on the table by the NNPC, we just need to bring that down. Thankfully, NNPC has been in the forefront of trying to drive a less than $10 per barrel unit cost of production. It's really what we have today. So we really, as a country, have to coalesce around that drive to remove waste from our cost of production and ensure we get to levels that are more comparable with the rest of the world. So rationalizing our operating expenditures really would be very important. And of course, we have to rephase our capital expenditures to make sure we don't destroy value in the first place, but phase it out in such a way that we still have enough to keep our country going, certainly in a forex sense at this point. Pursuing cash preservation initiatives and import substitution is just paramount. It's something we have to do. I fully endorse the point that Austin made about seeing our market much more as a West African market, ensuring that we capture the best we can in this market. We are big enough in this sub-region. We essentially have the resources, certainly in the oil and gas sense, to be able to power the region. And we must take advantage of this current window to do so. Gas, we have spoken repeatedly about gas being probably our biggest enabler to economic development. And it's a good thing the minister has declared this year as a year of gas. We really must do everything we can to make this sector work. as has been mentioned previously by Austin, this sector right now cannot pay for itself. The chain is broken. We have to find a way to smoothen that chain and enable a lot more investment into that sector. Ditto for local refining. A lot has been said of the example of the Dangote refining, and so Dylan also mentioned a few other refineries that are coming through. We have to do this value add. We cannot stay in this world of exporting everything and then importing everything as refined. It just doesn't work. I've listened recently to a lot of talk from other West African countries, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, talk about exactly the same thing with cocoa. How can they ensure a lot more local value add for cocoa? That's essentially what we should be talking about in terms of what we do for our own local refining of our products. I think the Dangotes of this world have taken a very bold step. We must really see, as a country, see to how we can actually lead to that project coming to some fruition for the benefit of the country. I will end by saying enabling foreign direct investment and ensuring certainty of contracts, certainty of clauses we have in our contracts is something we all must collectively work towards. It's probably the singular most important thing that, frankly, the MBCC and such other bodies must work on. There's nobody will bring in the kind of multi-billion-dollar investments into this country if they cannot be sure that their investments will be protected in terms of clauses in the contracts, in terms of respecting the clauses that are there. It's an absolute must for all of us. So let me leave it there and maybe take a few more questions during the question and answer session. So thank you very much. Back to you, Yona.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Osagi-Okunbo, for that interesting perspective to this discussion. Indeed, we are going to go into the next segment, which is the question and answer session. But before that, let me indeed thank the three panelists for a very stimulating discussion. Things we hear about, but very, very focused and succinct, put in a different way. Please use the Q&A button, distinguished audience. Please use the Q&A button to ask your questions. And I'm looking forward to getting more insights in terms of the answers. But before that, we have to take a sponsor's advert very briefly, and then we will go into the full Q&A session. Thank you. Sponsor that. Distinguished audience, thank you very much for your time and being so attentive up to now. We are going into the question and answer session, and thank you for those who have posted questions, interesting questions as well. In the interest of managing our time, we'll see how many questions we can run through because we've got lots of them already. I think I'll start with NCDMB, Mr. Adelano. There's a question here. You gave us a lot of insight on what the Nigerian Content Monitoring Board is doing, what is available, how you intervene. And you talked about the content fund, the $350 million fund. The question here is, who is this fund targeted at? Who are the beneficiaries? How would it help small and medium scale industries? And what do you want people to do? How do we get involved? How do we benefit from the fund? I'm combining two questions here. There's a second question in how can we benefit? How can a company benefit from that fund?
All right, thank you very much, moderator. I'll start by saying that NCDMB was actually created as a result of necessity. It's a child of necessity because there are gaps with respect to capability and capacity in the oil and gas industry. That was why NCDMB was created, to add value. Section 104 of the Act created a fund to which 1% of every contract is actually deducted and kept. This fund is under the care of NCDMB on behalf of the industry. So the fund is available to the industry, available to contributors in the industry. You are a player in the industry and you have at one time or the other contributed to the fund, then of course you can access the fund. The NCIF, which is an offshoot of the fund, is a scheme we specifically set aside to drive this. Over the years, there's been complaints about lack of access to the fund. We have more or less, if you permit me to use the word, experiment with so many ideas. We at first experimented with the banking sector, the banking sector. The fund was with the banking sector. We advised that the industry stakeholder who access to the banks, but somehow there were challenges. And so the stakeholders for whom that fund is actually meant for in the first instance couldn't access it. So we had to review the process some years back, and then we had to domicile a part of the fund with the BOI, the Bank of Industry. We started with a $200 million seed fund, to which stakeholders can actually apply. So the fund is actually managed, that's the NCIF, which is the Nigerian Content Intervention Fund, is managed by the Bank of Industry. It's available to every stakeholder in the industry through the Bank of Industry. Available to contributors, let me re-emphasize that. That is those that have contributed. We have data of all that in the industry. So, and the clearance have to come from us at a point, and the Bank of Industry will have to go through all the relevant banking conditions to guarantee that the fund is not unduly eroded, so that it's not a grant It's actually a loan to support, a credit facility to support validated industry activities. Yeah, so that the process of validation lies with the BOI and of course contribution from NCDMB. Once it's sanctioned, you get the loan, and then you can you have to pay back. So that's the idea. And because we are NCDMB, we don't have the expertise to manage financial activities. We have to let a banking institution manage it while we keep our eyes on what is going on there. As of today, over 96% of the initial 200 million had been assessed, and over 27 industry participants have also benefited from the fund as of today. And we expect that over time, there's that turnaround time. People are going to pay back, the fund will keep building up. We are adding more to it. We just added another $150 million to make it 350 million. So we keep building up as people pay back, others to have access to it. That's the idea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for throwing an insight. So for all those listening, please contact NCDMB and you'll know exactly what to do. The second question goes to Mr. Austin Avuru. You spoke extensively on opportunities in what we now know domestic, meaning West Africa, domestic gas. And knowing that in Nigeria, a lot has been said. I'm trying to combine two questions in the interest of time. A lot has been said about gas. It's a year of gas. And the person says other than NLNG, there are no big there's no big entity reaping the gas resources. So being a player in the space of the independent gas, as independent oil company in the gas sector, knowing that there are very few of you in this sector, what is your advice to independent oil companies on how they can get involved in the gas sector? Get involved in a big way so that this experience can be translated to West Africa.
Okay, thank you. Let me start with LNG. The LNG was set up primarily for gas export. Wasn't meant for the domestic market. It was part of the paradox of our economy that while they were exporting not just LNG, but part of the byproduct of their own processing meant that they also produced LPG, which was meant for export. But to help our domestic economy, the LNG has had to transship LPG into a mother vessel that then supplies it into a domestic market. So for indigenous players or for independents, we need to displace Nigerian LNG's LPG with the ones that we produce domestically. So for instance, in Seplat, the gas plant we're building at our annual gas project near Owerri has an LPG component. So when that is commissioned last quarter of next year, we'll be producing not just lean gas that goes to power, we'll be producing LPG, for domestic consumption, and we'll come out of that. We're also modifying our Oben gas plant and putting an LPG component, the same thing with our Sapele gas plant. Another small player, Platform Petroleum, where I used to be, currently produces LPG out of their gas plant at Umutu and supplies into the domestic market. So for independence, three key components. If you're in the gas business, you process the gas and deliver the lean gas into existing infrastructure, pipeline infrastructure. And that's where NMPC is large on this. So the ELPS, for instance, the OB3 and the AKK that is now going to the north, those are backbone gas transportation infrastructure. And so when you have your own gas processing facility, the lean gas you then pipe as a component into any of these backbone pipeline infrastructure to deliver to the end users that are either power plants or heavy industries like cement companies or ceramic industries as are springing up now. And then the other component, which is LPG trucks will come and take those ones and supply to domestic users in homes around Nigeria. So there's a lot of scope. As I said, current domestic gas consumption is just about 1 BCF a day. And in the next 5 years, when the minister says this is the year of gas, the intention is to triple that consumption volume from 1 BCF a day to about 3 BCF a day, going into power and heavy industries. And everybody is welcome to play in this. And I've built, processing plants that will deliver both lean gas and LPG, or even participate in the secondary infrastructure that will deliver lean gas into the main backbone infrastructure that NMPC has already provided or is providing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. That's really interesting. Maybe the next question I'll take here is for Mr. Okumbo. Indeed, at the back of what Mr. Vuru just said, it's the year of gas. That has been said, the government had declared it, but what are the practical steps, if you were to advise government, if you were the advisor, what are the practical steps we need to see to bring this into reality?
Thank you. I think first and foremost, the first thing to say is that Nigeria is essentially a gas province. What that essentially means is that we are not short of gas. In the early days, sometimes the debate goes between whether we are exporting our gas or using it for local consumption. Essentially, what we know from our reserve base is that the investments in gas can feed both export for our foreign exchange needs, but also domestic. I think both of us, both myself and Austin, essentially have been in the advocacy for this for a very long time. Because the point we have always tried to make is that the difficulties we have with the gas value chain affects both indigenous and internationals in the same manner. And it is issues such as we both mentioned during our presentations, whether the price we have for gas at the end point, because it's a chain. Sometimes people see the whole gas value chain from one point, either from the producer's end or from the consumer's end. The reality is that it is a chain. And if you don't get the gas price right to be able to feed the chain, you would soon find that a part of the chain is broken. And often the part that suffers the most tends to always be the one at the bottom of the chain. That's the producers, and that's Austin and myself in the industry. So it's important that first and foremost we get to a price that enables investment into the session. So if the price is not right, then you just find that people simply don't invest. That's very important. When I'm carefully picking my words when I say when the price is not right. I don't mean an infinite price that again ensures that customers across the value chain cannot pay. I think it's almost accepted wisdom now that for different segments of the market, the power market will probably need to pay something a bit more, a bit different, a bit lower than the industrial markets and all of that. But you need to find that right price that essentially services the chain and not an artificial price that somehow does not sufficiently ensure returns for everyone in the chain. We also must ensure that the kind of policies, so if I'm advising government, I say the kind of policies that you put in place are such that they are policies that enable gas production. We are in the throes now of trying to get the PID done in the country. A big element of that has to be to ensure that the terms that we put there that relates to gas essentially enables gas production. And we have all been involved in this discussion with government through time. But it's very, very important that the terms are sufficiently competitive that enables both indigenous and international players to essentially invest. And finally, I would say, certainly from our own parts of the world as well, things like security of assets are essentially very important. So when you go vandalizing oil pipelines or gas pipelines, ultimately it has a way of restraining the ability of you to essentially supply gas on a consistent basis. So just ensuring that we secure our pipeline and gas infrastructure is very, very important. And finally, as we always will say, just ensure that government pays your debt. So when you take power from the likes of Shell that has the Alpha power plants, or you take gas from us, let's just ensure that we pay for it. I mean, that's probably the bedrock of credibility for people to want to invest. If you don't pay, I mean, in the Shell sense, we are owed close to $200 million, and all of us in the value chain, including Seplat and all, we are all owed to different degrees for either gas or power supply. So let's make sure as a country, we learn to pay our debts. If all of these things are put into place, I'm pretty sure that we'll realize the ambition of essentially developing our gas to its potential and service the West African sub-region in the way we all aspire to do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. There's another question here to Mr. Austin Ovuru, saying, indeed, you've painted a fantastic picture of what should be in the next couple of years. Just the thought of 400 million SCOF going down the West African pipe gas line just gets one excited. So the question here is, and you've talked about the many things that gas can do. We always tend to think of gas to power, but there's iron and steel, there's so many things, fertilizer into agriculture. And you said that the pipeline could get to Senegal, now it's to Ghana. And the question the gentleman has put here says that, what are the impediments that have stopped the oil companies in Nigeria from tapping into these investments? What are the impediments that could potentially, maybe I'll add that, stop any new players from sort of benefiting from this infrastructure that's already there? What are the things that would stop us from benefiting from those, based on your experience? Austin? Well, the question is specifically to Mr. Avuru. I don't know if you can hear me. Otherwise, Mr. Okumbo, I'll pass it on to you, because you, as you said, you have similar experiences.
When it comes to gas, I can assure you there's no indigenous, there is no international. I think we're all in the same boat. I think it's most of what I have said. Remarkably, in the early days, the big discussion was, why would it be piping gas to the West African sub-region when we had shortages in Nigeria? But I think for those who took that decision many years ago, it was a very, very strategic investment. I mean, from what we are all discussing today, this is a sub-market that we have to see as one big market. So I hate to say it, sometimes even though the payment regime from the sub-region has been slightly better than what we see in the local environment, it's not also been without its hitches in terms of how readily people are willing to pay. Also, because the prices are more like market driven, it's tended to be much more, I want to say, a bit more attractive. But everything I've said earlier about our own constraints with respect to local distribution of gas to a large extent also affects the West African sub-market. So if the WACP, as we call it, that's the West African gas pipeline, is vandalized at source, it means that we run into a problem supplying our customers in faraway Ghana, wherever else this pipeline goes into. So some of those things also are there, but it's actually a market, I believe, that at the same time as we are evolving the Nigerian market, we really must expand and ensure that policies are stable, prices are stable, and the gas price that feeds into this thing sustains the chain. It's almost the same thing, but I would say it tends to work a little bit better in West Africa because the prices are a bit more market driven than what we have in country, which is why it's actually a very welcome opportunity for players who really want to enter. But I would be quick to say that that challenge will always be there between our needs as a country, which is huge, especially given our very limited power production and the needs of West Africa. But with the proper contract pricing, with proper contracts in place, and with the evidence support of the Nigerian authorities, it is doable.
Thank you very much. It's always nice to end on a positive note, that these things are doable, and just with the tenacity of what I know Nigerians are made of, then I know that we will do that. Ladies and gentlemen, I would love to take the other questions. There are questions here about whether there's still room for modular refineries that would have gone to NCDMB, but unfortunately we've run out of time and we really have to wrap this up. The Chamber will be sending the answers to these questions through the regular channel, so please be assured that all your unanswered questions will be answered. But I'd like to seize this opportunity to say thank you very much to Mr. Akintunde Adelano. Thank you for that insightful perspective from NCDMB. Thank you to Mr. Austin Avuru, opening up our minds to what gas should really be doing for the West African sub-region. And thank you very much, Mr. Osagi Okumbo, for a unique perspective and insight. I really, really think that there is hope. The future is gas, and we'll see the practical reality of the future being gas. Thank you for answering all those questions, being on the panel, but please, I'd now call on Mr. Oshuntoki to help us wrap this up. Mr. Akin Oshuntoki, please.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Fatai Williams. Without a doubt, it's been a wonderful time at this webinar. I'd like to thank our panelists and the moderator on behalf of the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce for coming to this event today. In closing, I'd like to make a couple of announcements, but before I do that, I'll ask all the panelists to please put on their videos. The Secretariat would like to have a picture. Mr. Avuru, if you're there, please put on your video and let's have a picture of this event. Mr. Avuru? Once that is done, then I'd like to make an roundup. Can I have the slide, Secretariat, please? We'd like to say a big thank you to our sponsors and our partners for making this event such a wonderful one. I'd like to start with Shell Nigerian Gas Limited. Shell Nigerian Gas Limited, thank you so much. Richardson Oil and Gas, thank you for your support. Swift Oil Limited, thank you for your support. Dreg Waters, Petroleum and Logistics, thank you. Swift Oil, we appreciate your support. On that note, we'd like to announce and invite you to our future programs. By popular demand, we are having a webinar in August 20 to be precise, Future of the Nigerian Healthcare Industry. It promises to be another exciting experience from the NBCC. In October, we are looking at Nigeria's communication industry post-COVID. Please join us. We'll be sending further details of these events. If you want to join the NBCC, you want to be a member, please contact the address on the screen. You can also follow us on social media with the addresses on the screen. Once again, I thank everyone for being part of this event, and we look forward to having you at our future programs. Thank you very much, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.